Hello, 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 hello. Good morning, good evening, good night. Wherever you're watching from, my name is Henry Sally, and this is the African Alumni Association. We are having the State of the Nation. Before we start, allow me to recite the land acknowledgement. We wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto African Alumni Association operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still the home of many indigenous people from across the Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to serve on this land. With that said, as we wait for people to join us, I'm going to play some music, and I hope you are going to enjoy it. Our panelists are already here, and they're excited to start. We shall be starting momentarily.
Economy.
The state. All right, guys. All right. Nice to see you. Nice to see that you're already here connecting. We are definitely excited to have you. We're definitely very excited to have you. We are having some technicalities, as you can imagine. As you can imagine, seems we have company. It seems we have company. Right. All right. kiri kitya bannaye kansubire muli bulungi muli bulungi muli bulungi muli bulungi. Are you excited to be here? Are you excited to be here? I am excited to be here, and I look forward to this important conversation. Look forward to this important conversation. I look forward to this very important conversation. I hope you are looking forward to this conversation as well. Right. So before we start, there's an important conversation that has been transpiring. Specifically, as you have already known, if you haven't already read my preamble, I am going to reread it and bring you up to speed. So, as some of you have already seen, this week's blogosphere has mostly been covered with speculations that Mr. Museveni and North Korea's President Kim Jong-un seemingly have a cozy relationship. Apparently, these two are rumored to have struck a deal to further their military collaborations through different channels. Central to the agenda, or rather on the agenda, is building a nuclear plant along Lake Victoria's Kalangala Island. Now, for those of you who do not know Kalangala Island, it's one of the biggest islands in Uganda. So this would align with Uganda's ambitions to enrich nuclear energy, something that President Museveni passionately defended in his September 2009 United Nations address as a necessary component for Africa's development. The above notion, however, is being debunked by some sections of society who are suggesting that Mr. Museveni is instead only enabling North Korea's imperial power prospects. These are speculations. These are conversations we need to have. We need to have these conversations. So this suggestion is being cemented by several video clips that are making rounds or that have been overly shared on WhatsApp social media. Among these allegations is the notion that Kalangala Island was sold to North Korea for purposes of building an underground nuclear plant. This is further speculated. It is further speculated that Bobi Wine's campaign team was arrested along the island for this very reason. So most people are saying that the arrests of candidate Chagulanyi's team on Kalangala Island stemmed from the idea that Kalangala is actually a completely different state now. These are quotes. These are speculations. We don't know if it's propaganda. We don't know the truth of these conversations. But these are the conversations that are happening. So that's one of the issues that we're going to be discussing. There are other issues that we're going to be talking about. Hopefully you are around to join us. So who is joining me? A couple of people are going to be joining me. One among them is Mr. David Kajowa. So Mr. David Kajowa is a PhD student at Ottawa University. So he's going to be one of our panelists for today. There's also, as always, as you already know, okay, so who else? I'm trying to get more people in. We do have Judith Nalukwago, who is a student and the Vice Guild President for Makerere University. She will be joining us shortly. And we do have as well, we do have Mr. Mitala, who is also part of us, part of this conversation. Who'll be joining part of this conversation. But before we start this conversation in full, uh, before I, before before I let Mr. Mitala and the rest introduce themselves, I'm going to play this video to give you context. So one of the agenda of the conversation is the fact that many people are talking about the issue of many of Chagulanyi's team who are arrested in Kalangala, but they are speculating that the reason why they were arrested was because Kalangala has actually been called Mali, North Korea. North Korea trying to build North Korea is trying to build an nuclear underground nuclear plant. We do not have any evidence to all these things that are being speculated. We are merely commenting on some of the issues that have arisen over the week. Uh, so let me play this video from 2009 by Mr. Museveni.
Take the floor. Mr. President, Excellencies, I will not read my statement because I will then repeat what the other leaders have said. Instead, I will make 4 points. Point number 1, I thank President Obama for convening this special session of the Security Council to discuss this very important topic. Secondly, it is clear that the possession of nuclear weapons is the main cause of other countries wanting to acquire nuclear weapons. It is not logical to say that a few of us should possess nuclear weapons and others should not. I'm therefore very pleased to hear that some of these countries which have nuclear weapons are saying that they are aiming at getting rid of all the nuclear weapons. Action leads to reaction. Reaction leads to counter-reaction. So if you look at the history, how did it all start? Germany wanted nuclear weapons to dominate the world with those weapons. The United States beat Germany to those weapons first. They used them. Then Soviet Union had to acquire the weapons in order to balance the United States. Then China, and so on. So you can see that the main cause of nuclear proliferation is actually the possession of those weapons. Number 3, the NPT is based on 3 principles which I think are very good. Non-proliferation, disarmament, and peaceful use of nuclear energy. Now, finally, I want to inform this Security Council that Africa is interested not in nuclear weapons, but in nuclear energy. The reason we're interested in nuclear energy is that if you take all the rivers in Africa, the total capacity of the hydropower there is about 300,000 megawatts. We are going to be 1.3 billion Africans by 2020. Now, if you take the United States, who are only 300 million people, they are now using 1 million megawatts. But all the rivers in Africa have got a potential of only 300,000 megawatts. Even if all the sites on the African rivers were developed, we would not have enough electricity to support the Africans. Unless, of course, you say that it has been scientifically proved that Africans don't need electricity. But if you do not take that absurd conclusion, then it is clear that Africa will have to use all sources of energy, including nuclear energy. Some people are talking of solar energy, but a kilowatt hour of solar energy is now at about 40 American cents. Yet a kilowatt hour of
Now, all this makes sense. I'm trying to introduce a conversation that I want you guys to be engaged in. All that makes sense. When we talk about nuclear energy, I think it all makes sense until another conversation transpires, which we do not know. Yeah, so all that makes sense until another conversation transpires. So apparently for Mr. Museveni, rightfully makes a conversation that indeed Africa needs nuclear energy. How they come about building that is subject for debate. That conversation happened in 2009. In 2000, most recently, a few conversations have also culminated, including one that I'm going to share shortly. One that speculates that perhaps what was offered in this conversation was just to wrap up some of the different thoughts that Mr. Museveni could actually be shielding. So listen to this conversation.
The U.S. stepped up sanctions on North Korea aimed at ending its nuclear program. The East African nation of Uganda agreed to end 50 years of military cooperation with Pyongyang. But that cooperation may be continuing. In violation of sanctions, the two nations are suspected of maintaining their ties with North Korean soldiers training Ugandan government forces. And Uganda might not be alone. Also suspected of violating sanctions are Tanzania, Sudan, Zambia, and Mozambique. Well, to discuss this further, I'm joined now from Kampala, Uganda, by journalist Dickens Okello, and from Dallas, Texas, political commentator and journalist Joshua Poro. Thanks both so much for joining us. Before we actually get into this discussion, I'd like to just first establish that you both agree North Korea is working with and in Uganda, but you disagree on whether it's actually beneficial to do so. So, Dickens, let me start with you.
All right. So again, trying to open up this conversation. We do have feedback. I don't know if my has feedback coming in. So allow me to ask these panelists to introduce themselves. Today I'm going to start Mr. Kajima. Who was Mr. Kajima? You want to introduce yourself?
Okay, you asked me to introduce myself, huh?
Yes, sir.
Okay. our dear viewers and listeners, wherever you are. I want to welcome you to the State of the Nation this Sunday. I know you'd rather be, you have alternative places to be and alternative things to do, but we certainly do not take it for granted that you choose to join us for this conversation. My name is David Kajova, as I've been introduced. I am a humble son of Uganda and a PhD student at the University of Ottawa. And I look forward to sharing my ideas with my panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kajova. Next, I'm going to ask the only lady on this panel. If you're watching on Facebook, if you're one of the panelists, if you're watching on Facebook, please either mute or switch it off, because it's giving us feedback. All right. So the lady in the house. Judy,
thank you so much, Sally.
Excited to see you. Introduce yourself, please.
Thank you so much. I am also happy to be back here again. My name is Judith Nalukwabu. I'm a final year student doing Bachelor of Dental Surgery, and I am also a student leader, Vice Guild President at Makerere University. I am happy to be here once more, and I'm sure the discussion is going to be fruitful. I'm here to learn and also to inform. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much again. Thank you so much. And then our very own, the lawyer.
The pleasure is mine. The pleasure is mine, Henry. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be once again here with my sister Judith and my brother David for yet another beautiful discussion of the current issues that are affecting motherland Uganda and the global community everywhere. I must comment very briefly on David's attire. I do like it. The Africanization, I've been reading something. I think it's in Ghana. The Ghanaian Minister of Education decided to introduce a school uniform, which is based on an African concept. So getting away from the colonial mentality of the school uniforms as you know them. So when I see David in this African attire, it makes me feel beautiful. And I think next time I'll try to copy your example as well. Yes, but by way of introduction and without wasting too much time, Julius Mitala is my name. I prefer to go by the name Mitala Muzukulu wa Mswangali, which the localization of myself. I'm a lawyer by training and currently working in the health and social health care sector in the United Kingdom. I am an ardent follower of developments that go on back in Kampala, and the reason I'm here is to be able to join my brothers and sisters to have a fruitful conversation and exchange some ideas and information about those sorts of things.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Mtala. Thank you so much to everyone who is joining us today. I have shown two videos, both of which touched a little bit on the issue of Kalangala and North Korea and nuclear and all that conversation. But before we delve into it, if any one of you is watching on Facebook, can you please switch it off? If you have two devices and you're watching on Facebook, we are getting feedback from you, the panelists, actually.
It's not coming from my end.
Well, is it? Are you watching on Facebook? Okay.
No, I'm not tuned on. I'm not on Facebook either.
Okay, cool.
Me neither.
Okay, so let's play this video and kickstart this conversation.
Arrested and stopped from campaigning in Kalangala Island, Ugandans and the world witnessed a great exhibition of massive weapons of destruction and the deployment of forces, including a battalion that is permanently stationed in Kalangala. Kalangala Island is now a country in a country that no longer belongs to Ugandans. Do you want to know what is going on in Kalangala Island? Do you want to know what Museveni and North Korea are secretly doing in Kalangala Island?
Well. So those were speculations that Kalangala is a country within a country. We don't know, obviously. But I'm curious what the people on this panel think. So you've probably seen these videos around. Of course, there are so many different videos that are speculating that Kalangala now is a country within a country. They are speculating that North Korea indeed wants to build an underground nuclear plant in Kalangala. They are speculating that Mr. Museveni and President Kim Jong-un have a cozy relationship that is intended to continue North Korea's nuclear ambitions. Contrary to what Mr. Museveni talked about in 2009, advocating for nuclear energy. We do not know. We haven't had anything from government. We have mostly had these conversations transpiring from different media channels. Is it propaganda or is it true? What are your thoughts? Mr. Mitala, why don't we start with you?
As you said, it's speculation, and I think the videos, especially the one pertaining to the secret deal that was recorded with some arms trader of Korean background, purporting to be setting up a deal to build a nuclear plant in Uganda. I think that video has been widely circulated. The authenticity of it is obviously difficult to comment about. We can only, as usual, I think we should expect that possibly the government would come up and put up a statement, and explain to the public what was happening, in that video. The reason, before I even get into, the deep analysis of whether the activities that were purported in that video, I think one of the things that we need to understand straight away is that the reason why these things come up for discussion is because they are in the public interest. The public has got every right to be told what its government is doing in their name. So obviously, everybody knows that North Korea is under sanctions, especially in terms of arms sanctions and nuclear sanctions. But we also understand that the North Korean government has designed a mechanism of being able to circumvent those sanctions, and they do send agents abroad out of their country in the name of investment or education or some kind of other charitable organizations. Nobody really knows, the truthfulness of those sorts of things, because unfortunately, and I must admit my limitation in this regard, because I am not so privy to, foreign affairs information. So the sorts of things we are discussing, they are based on information that's available in the public arena. But in my own assessment, you've got to look at things in the context of what's been happening, in Uganda in the recent past. Say in the last 3 to 4 months, prior to the January elections and before that, in the period, immediately before that, we witnessed, some ferocity of some force, some kind of a crude reaction by the government trying to ensure that, people are stopped from stepping in Kalangala. And I think even before that, there had been reports. There had been quite a number of people who had come up and they had reported, publicly that they had been arrested by the CMI, or and they had been taken into forced labor, on the Kalangala Islands. Now, when you look at the ferocity of the force that has been used against people, and it kind of it makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable about it. You wonder whether, is there something that really the government is trying to protect? Is there something they are trying to hide from the general public? Because we have grown up to know Kalangala Island as a tourist kind of attraction point. What has been known is that people go there for vacation. We used to know about a certain boat, a ferry that used to take people over the islands to go for short vacations, on the weekend or something like that. It seems like that place has become a no-go area. And questions have got to be asked. What is it that the government is trying to hide? Why are they behaving the way they are behaving? So when you look at things in that context, it kind of perhaps raises the suspicion and say maybe the sorts of things that are being said have got some element of truthfulness in them. But I don't know, and as I said, it's very difficult for me really to comment authentically on the correctness of the videos that have been shown. All I could say is that they are very worrying. They clearly depict criminal activity, and some of us are very uncomfortable with the way in which we are being portrayed as a country. I mean, in that video, one of the proponents in that video actually said something that's very interesting. He made a comment in regards to the professional world, the legal fraternity. He said that he had a lawyer friend of his in Uganda, and the comment he made was actually very disparaging. He said, these guys, their working style, their attitude towards work and those sorts of things, they are not as good as our standards,
Right.
So basically, and he went and they laughed about it. And the guy said, all you need to do is buy somebody a beer or a drink or some food, and they give you what you want. I think as a Ugandan, that is very worrying, because I think if that's how the world is looking at us in terms of those professional standards, you've got everything to be worried about it. That is how low the reputation of our, the reputation of Uganda has collapsed in the times of Mr. Museveni. And now for me, that's a huge indictment, to the leadership at all, overall. That's what I can say about that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mitala. I think you make a very good case, painting the picture, like indicting the government of Uganda for specifically being silent during this period, in that they haven't even had the guts or the courage to come out and dismiss these allegations. But also you paint a historical picture, events that have been happening over the last 6 or 7 years, where people in Kalangala are being refused from engaging in fishing activities, people being hindered from accessing Kalangala, things like that, and so on and so on. As we continue to interrogate these issues, these conversations, I think that we, as the public, both internationally and locally, Ugandan locally and international diaspora, I think it's very important to have these conversations. But I wonder what our sister has to say about what's going on.
Thank you so much, Henry. Given the fact that we are still speculating on what is happening, but like Mitala said, given the background of the things that have been happening, it's easy to believe that maybe Kalangala was sold off. It is easier to believe by us, the citizens, that Kalangala was sold off. But you ask yourself, the questions we're asking ourselves, Mr. Museveni in that UN Security Council says, the rivers of Africa cannot produce enough energy to sustain Africans. But when we come to the statistics of Uganda, the amount of megawatts we produce, we do not even consume them. Whereas I agree that we need nuclear energy, but it's not yet the time. If we are not consuming a quarter of what we produce from the river, so what is the importance of nuclear energy? And actually, our taxpayers' money is still being paid for the rest of the 3 quarters that we don't consume. So why don't we first connect the whole country to the national grid so they can be able to consume what we are producing, so that when we see it's deficient, then that is when we can bring in nuclear energy. But as of now, we don't even consume our quota. We are still paying money for the production of that, of all the megawatts that we are producing. So that is what comes into my mind, and I ask myself, so this nuclear energy, it's not about nuclear energy, it's about weaponry. That is what comes into my mind, because if we are not using the energy we are producing, so what's the point of nuclear energy? That is number one. Number two is, most Ugandans have lost hope in the government. In fact, even when there is propaganda being spread, people easily believe because there's no smoke without fire. That is how low our government has become, in that anything can be believed by anyone. And and this, at least it has come with some little evidence behind it, arresting people when they're going to campaign, stopping people from fishing. Then all of a sudden, fish die in Lake Victoria. So people keep asking themselves, what exactly is happening in the country? And all other things that have been happening in the country. So people are believing in what is happening, but we know if told that they want to build a nuclear plant, it won't for the Ugandans, for the benefit of a few individuals, like it has always been. So that is why we Ugandans have to put in all energy to fight what is going to happen in Kalangala, because one, our people are going to be displaced. Two is it's not to our benefit, it's the benefit of a few people. Number three is, if and when you hear the money, $5 million US, so little money for an island like Kalangala. So you ask yourself, what is the government up to? Like every other time you ask yourself, okay, it's now no longer surprising when you see such things happening. You're like, okay, now this is another one. Okay, let's wait for another one. So anyway, to cut the long story short, it's time for us Ugandans to get involved in these things, understand what they're doing to our country, and to us to participate into changing our country, into putting the change that we deserve and the change we need. Thank you.
Right, putting the change that we need. It's like all speculations, interrogating. We are trying to interrogate this conversation. You just say that there is no smoke without fire. There is no smoke without fire, and I want to agree with you on that. There's no smoke without fire. But if there's any kind of fire that is coming up, where is the government? Why is the government quiet? Do we need to hear from Mr. Oponopondo, or whoever speaks for the government of Uganda? Mr. Kajama, what do you think? Any comment on that?
Well, thank you very much, Henry, and my sister Judith and Muzukuru wa Mswangali. I particularly like that title because I have a friend of mine who, when you call him on his phone, the response he gives, he starts by introducing himself with his full names and then concludes with Muzukuru wa Mswangali. I think you come from the same clan to that effect. And I think I need to find out, maybe there is something special about that clan that you love to put it out there. But to get to the point of the matter, I think my colleagues and fellow panelists make very astute observations. When I think about this matter, I look at it from two sides. To start with, I am a bit conflicted. The first question I ask is, could this be propaganda? You know, and subversion of some sort. Because given the history of our country, we cannot rule that possibility out. There is a possibility that indeed this is a propaganda and subversion. Because when you look at our history and the politics of our history, we have always had this politics of suspicion, you know, whereby if I could put it in other terms, the kind of politics where I paint Henry bad, and therefore I am good because I've painted Henry bad. And you see, it has worked through history. And one way it could be that someone saw the video, for example, that we saw when Mr. Museveni was articulating the idea of nuclear energy, which I think has its merits.
Yes.
It has its merits.
Yeah.
Yes, we could talk about, like Judith has well articulated, that we do not utilize the potential we already have. But sometimes when in these forums, we are talking strategically. We are thinking ahead, because you realize, for example, the president was talking in terms of 2020, and Uganda has a vision 2040. So it makes sense if this was a strategic conversation, because if you're going to, if a country is going to engage in nuclear energy, you don't say it today when you're going to produce tomorrow. These are conversations you need to have ahead of time. So it would make sense, because there are merits of it. For example, when you talk about the conversation of climatic change, nuclear energy has more advantages in that regard, in terms of when you look at the percentage of emissions, into the environment, the risks involved with air pollution. It has advantages over other forms of energy. So you would understand the benefit of that. So it is possible that someone based off of that to come up with a very wonderful propaganda. So it does fit into the dichotomy very well. It is a possibility. However, on the other hand, it is also actually possible that there is value to the claims being made, and we cannot certainly discount that, because again, when you look at how our government operates, it is not new to have these kinds of, if you like, background deals and shady deals. For example, you remember some of the controversies we've had in relation, for example, to the environment, like we were talking about the issues of forests in Uganda. There has always been controversy. We have a lot of back deals that somehow have not found their way into Parliament, but they're happening, and so we've had that. And so it puts you in a position of, okay, it's a possibility. It could be subversion, indeed. It's also a possibility it could be true. And it doesn't help the fact that our government has significantly lost the trust of the people. There is a general and concerning mistrust for our institutions. I remember sometime last year, there's some activities I wanted to, some things I wanted to get done at our High Commission. And when I went there, I remember thinking and wondering, are they not going to extort money? Is someone not going to ask, for backup options? And I was worried when I was going. And I was going to travel from one province to another to access these services. And I remember saying to myself, you know what? Just in case I face this, let me be prepared, to deal with this. And that's how that's the memory we have about our government institutions. Now, I'm happy to report that I was surprised. The system was smooth, it was transparent, and none of that kind happened, actually. And I must commend our High Commission for that. And so, but you see that this has been created in our memory. So when stories like these break out, you understand why they pick up steam, they pick up momentum, and many people believe them. Now, does that necessarily mean that these stories are not true? No, it doesn't. Why? Because when you look at North Korea and what, for example, our government might stand to gain in associating with North Korea is, I think it was also mentioned in that video that you deal with them and they will give you what you need, but there are not so many strings attached. For example, in terms of democracy, in terms of human rights, and because they don't care about these things. In any case, it's not one of their values. Alternatively, the alternative would be the Western powers, seem to be big on the values of democracy and human rights. And so you would understand that, for example, you see last week we were just talking about the conversation around the European Union proposed sanctions and the response they gave in terms of human rights. And you saw the government of Uganda responding strongly indeed and indicting the European Union Parliament for undermining the sovereignty of Uganda. So you see that Uganda has a problem with this, and so you would understand why they might seek alternatives. And I think one of also the countries in the conversation has been North Korea. So And certainly, we see when the government doesn't comment on this matter, it is telling on two fronts. One, it could mean that indeed there is something. Absence of comments could mean there is something. And so we don't know how to navigate it and to respond to it, at least not yet. So what we do is we leave it to circulate as if it were propaganda. Because if you do not pronounce yourself on a matter, you have plausible deniability on both fronts. So you have not denied it, but you have not accepted it either. So you leave it to the court of public opinion. That has its disadvantages, but it has its advantages as well, because you avoid pronouncing yourself on the matter. Two, it could also mean that it's not an issue, because you are, I think, as my panelists and my viewers might also accept, governments have, there's so many stories that break about governments. Like a lot of things always break out. There's an old saying that if you have a destination, you cannot stop and throw stones at every dog that shows up on the way. Now, whether or not the issue as consequential as the issue of nuclear it can be relegated to the realm of barking dogs that we need to ignore is a conversation we might need to have on another day.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But indeed, it is possible that you ignore it, because sometimes by responding to a rumor, you actually fuel it more. But by responding to a rumor, you might give it more authenticity than it has. But the question is this rumor small enough for us to ignore, or is it big enough for the government to pronounce itself on the matter? And that's a conversation that we could have on another day. But for example, on my side, if we have nuclear in question, and looking at how on the global scale, the conversation of nuclear and what that has brought in terms of the countries that have been in this conversation, I would rather think, and this is my opinion from not being necessarily an expert on foreign policy and how government processes operate in terms of foreign policy, I would rather that maybe at some point, and I like to believe and think that maybe at some point our government might say something to this regard. Thank you.
I think I just want to interject very quickly on that one. I think one of the things that all of us, four of us on this panel, would agree is that we are approaching this matter very cautiously, because as David has just said, we are really careful to make sure that we are not being sucked into some kind of conspiracy, which might end up kind of damaging, the credibility of some of the things we're gonna say here. And I agree with everything that David says. There's obviously a case for every country to have nuclear energy. If it's going to be used for the right reason. As when I say it's going to be used for the right reason, that is, you are putting people as the central focus in everything that you are doing. There's no problem with that whatsoever. The worrying bit is that we have these rogue governments, we have these rogue states, which are, for me, I've decided to refer to them as the pariah states. These are collapsed states. They don't have they don't have any regard to the fundamental principles of governance. There is lack of rule of law. Basically, there is no oversight. There is no controls. And when we have a situation like that, it's like you are really trading on very dangerous ground, because you don't know what might happen next. In terms of the benefits of having nuclear energy, absolutely, there's no question about that. I mean, we are all aware, for those of us who live in these, accelerated kind of development countries, that, for instance, car manufacturers are moving away from, petrol and diesel vehicles. They are going into electric vehicles. That's where they are going. I mean, just a couple of days ago, Jaguar Land Rover here, which is one of the biggest manufacturers of these luxurious cars, they have announced that they are come 2023, which is not very far from today. I think either 2023 or 2025, they are completely stopping, manufacturing diesel and petrol vehicles. They are going electric. So We have now a problem where, for instance, in Uganda, we've put oil as our biggest ambition, you know. So where does that leave us when the world is changing in the way it's changing, you know? So possibly the answers could be nuclear energy when it's being, you know, when the vision we have is to use that energy in a manner that is constructive and beneficial for everybody. But as I said, and I must really emphasize this because this is really important, my concern is here that we have, because you cannot trust a government that is not open with its people. You can't. Whatever they do, it is bound to be suspicious. So this is why we are saying, given what we know, what has been happening within our boundaries for the last several years, or actually just put it back in the last 6 months, we know horrible stories that have come from that particular place. Doesn't the timing surprise you? Why does this thing come at such a critical moment in time? That's really not a question for me really to answer, but I must say we are approaching this issue with a more objective kind of approach. We don't want to be swept into conspiracy theories. Yes, there could be issues of subversion. I don't know whether that's what it is. What I mean, from what I've seen, it's just really worrying. I mean, if the government doesn't, if people who are responsible don't come up quick enough, you know, to debunk these myths and mysteries, you know, by the time they decide to do that, the damage will be far beyond them to control.
And I think you make a very good case when you say that government needs to at least come out and either deny or
paint a light on it.
Explain to the population, explain to the citizens of Uganda, explain to the world populations, to your partners, your East African partners, your African partners, your international partners. This allegation cannot just be swept under the rug. And like it, when you look at the events that have happened over the last couple of months, specifically one that transpired during the campaigns, where over 100 people, I believe, Chagulanyi's team, over 100 of them arrested along the island, that very island where allegations are being smeared that it is potentially sold. It was potential. The island was potentially sold to North Korea for their nuclear ambitions. When you have arrested over 100 people who have, without any evidence of what they did wrong, without presenting them to civil courts, but instead taking them to military courts to judge them, and not being straightforward on why you are actually charging them. I think this is very important. Either the government needs to release those people and dismiss the propaganda that is going on as just propaganda, or they need to take whoever they arrested on that trip on the Kalangala Island to court, either civil court, charge them with whatever they think are crimes that they did. If they continue to keep quiet, if they continue to ignore these events that are happening, I think the world is going to continue having that skepticism about the government's intentions regarding building nuclear energy. And as we proceed as we proceed in this conversation, I think it's very important for us to now think about the different issues. I mean, as we transition from that conversation to another, we need to evaluate how government has been responding to its people. For example, I wonder if any one of you has some comments regarding why the military, for example, brutally beat up the journalists in Kololo because of the events that were happening. Of course, one of the the prominent MPs in Kampala speculated that one of the culprits was a white person. I have no idea how true that is. There is some footage that I'm willing to share with you shortly, but I'm wondering if any one of you has any comments or regarding that, what transpired.
That's an interesting one. You know, this is how I look at it. You know, it's like when there's a big bully somewhere, there's a big boy kind of mentality. You know, and you know that you are the biggest on the village, and you know whatever happens, nothing will happen. You know, and then maybe you kick a ball or you box the boy, and he runs to his grandparents to report. You know. But you know the grandparent is frail and they cannot do very much. You know their backing or their responses are not gonna, you know, have any effect on you. So it might just kind of, you know, give you more kind of, you know, motivation to go out and do the things you do, because it's the impunity kind of thing. You know, for me these things, they are very sad. You know, they are really very sad to see, and they are not justifiable in any way. They are better ways that can be done to deal with these sorts of things. It's not really necessary in this day and age, but I think we have come to a point where, you know, the sorts of things that we are seeing are not surprising anymore. You know, so many people have gone through this on a day-to-day basis. You know, I remember an old friend of mine, whom you might know, Henry. You know, Council Judy Mbabari, when he used to be very active in Kampala politics. You know. I mean, he used to undergo that kind of beating, and we are talking many years ago. You know, he used to go undergo. I mean, so many people have gone through those kind of experiences. You remember during there was, I don't know whether it was the walk to work kind of business, but there was some event which was kind of prominent, and I think this is the time when certain boys or certain young people used to carry, you know, small animals and bring them to Parliament. You know, in protest of the sorts of things that they did not agree. They didn't feel like, you know, the country was going in the right direction. So they would go carry some small animals, paint them a certain color, and walk march with them to the folks, to the floors of Parliament to come and, you know, make a point. And one time we saw a security man, you know, kicking one of those animals. You know, he kicked it so much that that everybody watching that, you know, wondered what actually happened to that animal, whether it survived or not. You know, but you know, it's the sort of thing that we've come to. It's not surprising anymore. You know, I think the modus operandi for you know, for our folks over the other side is just, if they don't hit you, you're possibly not going to get the lesson. But I think one of the things that has been said, which I found kind of very funny in a way, somebody was saying that, you know, it's about high time that even these journalists should get, you know, a taste of the soup, because they've been bystanders when the general public has been suffering with these things on a day-to-day. I think that's really, it's a sad kind of thing to say. But what cannot be taken away in this conversation is that nobody is safe, because it's now the time for suppression. You know, the government wants, they want a certain narrative. They don't want to hear anything that's, you know, outside their narrative. And therefore, if you got anything that is not appealing, that doesn't seem to support their line of approach, you are definitely an enemy, and they will use all means available to them to make sure that you are out of the way. The president said it himself. He said he's going to apply, you know, a kind of multiple approach. He would say he would use the soft means, he would use the hard means, and he would use everything, you know, at his disposal to make sure that he crushes, you know, what he refers to as enemies of Uganda. So these sort of things are not surprising. But again, and I think this is going to be said again and again and again, the comparison is now out there for everybody to see. Is what we have what we need to have? Is there a different way we can approach to do things? Because if I was in charge of a situation like that, what's so difficult with letting people take their petition? You know,
right?
What is so difficult about it? Do you really have to resort to? And I think one of the other worrying situation is that again people in public office never being able to respect or tell the truth, because in the few hours following that event, so many statements were put out by so many different people, and each one of them is contradicting the other. So who do you believe? What really happened?
What do you believe, and who do you, exactly? So I want to show for those of you who are not, for those people who haven't followed this conversation, I want you to watch this video. This video is coming.
Wabadde Honorable Barosias owerubaga yakubiddwa ne suuti n'eyulika ekooti. Honorable Onyeko baamukubye n'emmoroka ne bagyasa. Honorable Ndiwalana w'ebukoma nsimbi yakubiddwa n'omukono ne guzimba. Honorable Nakimuli ow'e Kalangala yakubiddwa nga n'abamukubye basajja. Nsabozeeyo akatambi ako. Olaba abantu be baatutte mu court martial. Sebalye mabega katutereko mu slow motion. Akuba mweru baleese baddugavu. Kazeeko obwedde okazannya.
Oba wali abadde mu kasana.
Nedda mayanzi. Nze ne bwonteeka mu kasana siyinza kweruka. Noga nti nabadde muzungu. Teeka ogwo omukono gwa kistopping awo. Zaayawe mabega. Njagala bannansi bamanye nti olw'okuba omuddugavu tatekinga critical moment oyo muki. Asembye ku mukono gwa ddyo. Akubye oyo. Nyiga abantu batambuze. Oyo ddala muddugavu.
Okay, so that completely confused me because I was very busy condemning the Ugandan military forces, and then I see this new day. I don't know how to.
I don't quite understand what Honorable was trying to refer to. What was he saying there?
So
I think he was trying to say that the people who participated in the beating are not the ones that were presented in the courts and charged.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that is what he was trying.
David, do you have any comment on that? Like, how should we deal with this kind of situations? Why is the government still very adamant about employing this kind of engagement with her citizens, even after the end of the elections? Well,
there could be a number of reasons. One, I think all of us here can attest, if we grow up back home, is that the go-to way of disciplining from when we were children would be clobbering. So at home, at school, if you misbehaved, you would be clobbered. I remember when I was a little boy, I went to there's a school I went to. I was very young. I was in part of it. I was in top class and P1 and P2. Those classes. I went to a certain school back there in Mityana. And they used to try to teach us how to communicate with the Queen's language, the one we're using right now, English. And I remember they used to write names. We had people writing names, like in class, prefects. Then we had this, bones and whatever. And every Friday evening was the day of reckoning. and so the prefects and the class monitors, and first of all, they would begin with the coat, the coat that, the sack that we used to wear and the bone. And so the first question would be like, the one they gave it on, the one who had it would, so you mentioned who gave it to you. So whatever your name would be mentioned, you come on a panel of teachers who are holding, whips, and you'll be clobbered a few times. And I remember I used to get a share of those because I was very playful. And you can't play soccer in Uganda. You can't play football. I mean, you can't play football in English. So you can't say, hey, pass the ball. It was harder. You would say, Gwenawe Samba, So that could be one explanation. But anyway, that aside, I think we need to get back to our history for a bit as a nation. When I look at our history, we don't seem to have the concept of dialogue and diplomacy in our national consciousness. Because when you look at all the previous regimes, each regime was accusing the other of disrespect of human rights and, misuse of power. Yet each of them seems to have done almost exactly the same thing or something related or arguably, following through the same line. And so it therefore means that I think the problem that we have as a people, maybe something that we just had in our national consciousness, it is not per se, we're not per se against violence, as if our leaders are not necessarily against violence, but rather against who has the legitimacy over violence.
Right.
It seems to be an enterprise towards the change of guards, not the change of processes and of the same. I have seen commentators, for example, indicting the opposition for being, for example, intolerant themselves in their speech, and there are times I've asked myself a question that if the roles were reversed and those that are striving for power actually have power, would they have acted differently?
That's a fundamental question. That's a very, very critical question, actually.
If you look at their narrative, if you look at their rhetoric, if you look at how they engage with those who differ, would they act differently? I'll give an example. Mr. Museveni, the current president of Uganda, said one of the reasons he was against the violence orchestrated by the state, towards people. And when he found a solution, when he looked for a solution, I was reading an article this week by one of the patriarchs of the country. I think he's called Mr. Kanyomozi. He used to be a legislator. It was published in a Monitor sometime last week. He said that Mr. Museveni was offered an alternative to negotiate, almost something of power sharing. There were the alternative peaceful means, and apparently, according to his story, he rejected that. And this is a person who later actually joined him. He said he rejected that and opted to go and fight. Andrew Mwenda likes to say that Mr. Museveni is a specialist in violence. And you would understand that because if you come through a guerrilla war, and I remember there's a time I was listening, there was a program on CBS where they used to say, talking about how much they used, during their wars, and everywhere. So it is clear that in our history, we seem to turn to violence as a means to suppress those that differ, to suppress dissenting voices. And it is very disturbing specifically because it came during a week after the European Union had just, the European Union Parliament had just talked about human rights violation, and the government had, set back a rebuttal of sovereignty and whatever, letting us to handle our processes. And of course, the president almost saying that they do not understand what is going on in Uganda. So it is ironic that in this exact week, that happens to journalists, and so, and of course, but what I when you look at authoritarian regimes throughout history, they tend to use the tactic of fear. Because if I see a member of parliament clobbered on camera, because when they were beating journalists, I do not want to believe that they did not for a single moment we actually think that whatever they were doing would be captured on camera. I don't want to think that these people are that shallow and narrow-minded. I don't want to think that they don't know that these things actually will come out to the light of day. So therefore, two things are possible. Maybe, like someone I think insinuated during one of the political shows in Uganda this week, maybe there are elements within the security forces that are trying to undermine the state by doing things to paint the state in a wrong picture. Or these people actually know exactly what they're doing, because by instilling fear, then what happens is that the wananchi, like myself, will say, if a member of parliament could be treated like that, what about me? Because, for example, you saw towards the elections how they drove in these armored vehicles through Mombasa, and they were riding through Kampala, and soldiers were moving in Musururu Moja, Kila Muntu, in Kampala, and it was all over all media houses. And you saw what happened on social media, the reaction to that. It was a reaction of, oh my God, we're in trouble. And, people, stay home, please don't dare. And of course, the leaders came on power and said, if you dare disrupt, we are ready for you. So I think you see a hint of a move towards fear. And I think for me, this works in that regard, because you cannot go to the road tomorrow and claim anything after you've seen something like that. And of course, then of course there was that apology. And people were saying, well, it is very good the Chief of Defense Forces has apologized. I think it is very good that he did apologize, indeed. It is a good thing. But you see, there's something I call the absurdity of an apology. The absurdity of the apology is this. I think we used to use this in debates. For example, you will use a derogatory term about an opponent, because the moderator would call you out on that and ask you to withdraw the statement. So when they call you out, you say, I withdraw my statement. But logically speaking, that statement is already gone.
It's already been made, yeah.
It's already made. You can't unsay something.
Right.
You can't unsee something. So the apology by the military commander cannot in some way make Ugandans unsee what they saw.
Right.
And the message it communicated to them. The message is already sent. Apologies an apology is a matter of saying I'm sorry. And tomorrow it will be the same thing. It is not the first time this has happened. And so I guess as I conclude this, there's a statement that I have once read, I think by someone, a certain admirer, I think it was called Adam, I think.
Right.
It says the difference between the police and the military is one fights the enemies of the states, and another serves and protects the people. Now, when the military becomes both, then the enemies of the state tends to become the people.
Of course, definitely.
So I think what we have in Uganda is we have a military that is both the military and the police. For example, I am still trying to understand what was military like about journalists and people going to the UN offices. I do not understand why that required a military operation. I saw ready talks in the media. And so, because the military understands one language, when you see ready talk, they understand one language.
It's a fight.
It is a fight.
Yeah.
And for me, don't blame these men in uniform for fighting, because that's what they are trained to do.
Right.
And so for me, when I see them assembled before the court martial, without the commander, the chief being assembled, because these people work on orders. And if you deploy them, and they know they're regular people, and their work is doing whatever it takes
to destroy the enemy.
To destroy the enemy. Their job is to destroy. And so for me, those officers were doing exactly what they were trained to do, to destroy. So the problem for me is not the officer. It is the person responsible
for those officers. My question is, why are these officers here in the first place?
Right.
And for me, why are they on the street?
And I think as you ask that question, I want to give the lady on the panel the opportunity to say something, because she has been quiet for a while now. Judith, you are muted.
I've unmuted.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on this?
I would like to agree with the rest of the panelists that it's just the government is trying to send a message to the people that in whatever you're trying to do, maybe a protest or a strike, we are ready for you. They're trying to communicate to the people, by the time I can beat up someone with a camera and I know that this person is recording and it's going to reach media, what of you has nothing? They're just trying to tell us that they are ready for anyone who is going to bring up a fight. And also, the fact that the government wants to control the media perspective. You see, when people are informed of what they need, what are their rights, and all sort of, they will demand for what they want, or they will demand for what their rights are. But whenever people are uninformed, and that is what, for example, the Electoral Commission does. The Electoral Commission never gives voter information to people. So that you're not informed, so you do not know what you're supposed to do. Like I told you the last discussion we had, the Electoral Commission never used to release youth election information to the people. So people never used to participate because they didn't know. This was the first time people really participated a lot, because opposition political parties managed to put it out there and people got to know. So the state wants to control media, in that these opposition people do not have space in media. And when they do not have space in media, that means information is not reaching the people. And if information is not reaching the people, that means people cannot demand for anything. And that's what happened in the elections. The switch of social media. Actually, as I can tell you, most people's lines were actually blocked during election period. Just that maybe you may not have gotten to that. Many people's lines were blocked. So they switched off communication so that you cannot know what is happening the other side, this side. So you cannot coordinate. So I think that is what the state is trying to show, or to tell the people that we are more ready than you think. Any weapon you bring, we shall crush you. Like Museveni always says, you do anything, we shall crush you. So yeah, they're trying to instill fear among the people, and I believe it has worked. It has actually worked. But all I know is there comes a time when hope overtakes the fear, when people know that it's time. It's been so long. It's time we overcame the fear and worked on what we want. So yes, it has worked, I believe, because I mean, you cannot rule over a country for 35 years and you think it's just been democracy all through. It's because of fear and the threats they put in people. But with time, people will go beyond their fears and demand for what they want.
I want to hear from Muzukuru wa Muswanga.
Henry, I know you quickly want to move on to something else, but let's just remind ourselves, in the recently concluded, presidential impeachment trial for Donald Trump, one of the things that the objectives that the impeachment managers were trying to achieve, they were trying to attach responsibility to Donald Trump for having incited the violence, that resulted into the chaos that you saw in Washington. So I think this is a point that's really crucial, and David touched a little bit on it. It's the question of accountability, the question of the impunity, really, because we all know that when there is somebody who is in charge, there is a chain of command. There's really a chain of command. We know that they are trying to say that the soldiers who beat up the civilians or the journalists were in record time, by the way, they were quickly arrested, placed before whatever disciplinary panel. They read the charges of misconduct or whatever, and they read them the punishments, in record time. That is something that is still remarkable, needs to be taken account of as well, because there's a process that needs to be followed. This is not just presenting a bunch of boys and showing that this is what has happened and this is what we've dealt with it. There has to be a process. So there is a chain of command there. I mean, where is the responsibility of the senior, security official? Yeah.
Yet we are still investigating those who are involved in November.
Absolutely.
And those who are involved in Kayunga.
but the point I wanted to drive is that there is that chain of command, and we know that responsibility should. The only way you can correct these mistakes from happening again in the future, you have to make somebody who is in a senior position pay the price of those mistakes. As long as it's these, because I consider those boys really innocent. I mean, even if it was me in that position, what would you do? Would you really stand up against your army commander and say, we have sent you to go and carry out an operation and you refuse to do it? It's just impossible. The next thing, they will be shot dead for being mutinous. But we know that there is somebody who is in command, and actually there's a name that's been thrown about actually, and there. Without delving into the names of people, because we are not really interested in individuals, but there is a name that's been thrown about as the person who was in command of that operation on that day. And his record has also been stated, the sorts of thing that he has done previously, to different, on different operations, So in a normal kind of environment, somebody would really be stepping aside and say, look here, something has gone wrong. I apologize, and let somebody else, take over, because I'm not in position to carry out, performing effectively as I should be. Instead, what we do get promised is these, wish-wash, apologies. And the next time they will say that actually they are going to help them with the bills and hospital bills and give them a bit of compensation here. It's really ridiculous, really. I think there has to be some kind of respect, for the offices that people are holding. Rather than if you just come and issue those kind of empty statements, I don't think they really carry any meaning whatsoever. That's the way I look at it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Bitala. I want to remind the people who are watching us that you are watching the State of the Nation. We are unedited, we are uncensored, we are the State of the Nation. And I know we have been putting the magnifying glass onto the government in power today. But I want to take a step back and do some evaluation on the opposition as well. In this, I want to specifically touch on the President General for DP. Prior to the elections, we all know that the President General for DP made a promise to the nation, and he specifically told all Ugandans that if he is unable to mobilize more than 15 members of parliament for the next parliament, he will be standing down as President General for DP. We all know, now that you are here, we all know that he just recently made a press conference and said that he will not be standing down. But we also know that he is not participating actively, at least as far as I know. He's not actively participating in the petition, the elections, presidential elections petition, which to some extent means that he probably believes that the results were free and fair. I don't know about that. I don't know what his thought process is. But the fact that he hasn't come out to challenge those elections, and the fact that he presented himself as the change maker, I think Mr. Kajoba pointed to this, that we don't know even the alternatives. We don't know how they are going to behave when they come into power. Mr. Robert Moore could not fulfill his promise to stand down as President General for DP. What will he do when he becomes President of Uganda? Any thoughts? Mr. Kajoba, why don't we start with you?
There is a statement that keeps going around on social media in Uganda that says Uganda Chinyuma. The thing about Uganda is it frustrates you so much, and sometimes you get so frustrated and then you just laugh it away, not because it is funny, but because you're lost for words. But I think our problem is systemic in Uganda. We, since independence, we have been struggling with this experiment of a nation state that we are not very much used to, given our history. For example, when we look at our national consciousness and in our history, we had a system of kings and chiefs, and you see, when you became king, it was, being a king was a birthright. You know, it was a birthright that only went away when someone died. Sometimes I tend to think that this problem still permeates our national consciousness and is manifested in our leadership practices. Because in Uganda, political positions are more or less, if you like, almost a right, something that it is our right. It is my right to be a member of parliament. It is almost my right to be, president. And so, so Mr. Norbert Mao, for example, the President General of DP, perhaps at this point doesn't know anything. He doesn't know how to be anything else apart from being president of DP. I don't know when was the last time he practiced, but he probably doesn't know anything else apart from now. All the humor aside, do I think that I think one of the biggest problems in our political atmosphere back home is the idea that the leader of the party is necessarily the presidential candidate, flag bearer. I think that is much of a problem. So it is almost that the presidential flag bearer and the chairmanship of the party are synonymous. And I think that is problematic, because it is one thing to actually build structures of the party. It is another to be a frontman. These two things are a bit different. And so, if, let's say, if the president of this party steps aside, I think the risk and the fear is going into political demise. Because now what becomes of him politically after he's not president of the party? Right. Look at the history of people who used to be presidents of parties and now are no longer. Where are they? Where is Mr. Orara Otunu?
Right.
They strive, they struggle for relevance. Even one who was very powerful, I think one of the most powerful opposition leaders we've had in the history of Uganda has been Kano Kizza Besigye.
Yes.
But I think he realized that because he wasn't the leader of the party this year, or the past in this previous election, his influence has almost wavered. His influence has almost gone away. Like, and his if you like, his visibility has been affected by that.
Diminished.
Probably that is the fear in our political leaders. Now,
while I might not necessarily have a problem with the leader of the bearer of the ideology insisting that they would like to be, the leader of the party for, I don't know, for whatever. Because, for example, you could not have told Dr. King that now that you have led the social, the civil rights movement for this long, please retire and let someone else lead. Or you couldn't tell Mr. Mandela that I think you've led enough in this struggle for power, for the liberation of South Africa, and fight against apartheid. And since you were the one who was leading the, you were the voice for this number of years, now stop and let others come. Because an argument can be made.
The difference in this case is that the words came from the president.
That's where I am going. That is where I'm going. That is exactly where I'm going. We could have a conversation, and someone might probably make a case and say, we have not achieved the objectives of whatever we are looking for. We cannot discount that argument, or maybe someone can make that argument. It could have its merits on another day. The problem I have with the leader of this party is he gave his word, and he said, I will stand down. No one asked him to make that statement. Now, one of the issues that the opposition charges Mr. Museveni of is not being a man of his word. Because he told us that when he asked for the third term, it would be the last. Then after that, they removed the term limits, he came again. Because he told us he wanted one more term to finish what he had started and prepare a transition. Then after that, he came back again. Now it has been age limit removed. So it's been a consistent. At some point, he said he will not stand after 2006. And we have all unanimously told Mr. Museveni, you told us this. You're going back on your word. Now, when the opposition leader who said that I won't come back does exactly the same thing, then what it does, it discredits whatever he has to say next. Because how sure are we that if we give you, let's say, the state today, saying that you're going to organize the state and help us put back controls in our constitution, how sure are we that you're not going to go back on your word? And that is the problem that I have with Mr. Mao. And for me, it goes back to what I said initially, that I don't know if the opposition people that we have that are articulating this message of hope and telling Ugandans we need a different Uganda, I do not know whether if they're given the mandate, they will do, So Mr. Mao, I think, missed the point in proving to us otherwise. He missed the point in that regard. And I think it is very unfortunate. And if I were Mr. Museveni right now, I would be enjoying wherever I am, and that would be a frame of reference, because it will further consolidate the argument that before your vision is achieved, whatever that vision, and the problem of that vision is it is defined by you. So until that vision is achieved, then you can't go away. And so it was a very unfortunate cause, but I think it goes back to our consciousness. The concept of serving and going away is not something that we don't have that in our history.
Not yet.
And we struggle for that.
We struggle for that, indeed. And you make a very good case. And I think Mr. Mao missed the point, missed the opportunity to pretty much show, to exemplify the slogan for DP, which is truth and justice. On the one hand, this truth was not really truth because he went back on his word, but also it undermines the notion of justice within his party. And I don't want to say that he should have stood down right away. He had the options. He could have told us that, as I promised you during the campaigns, I am not going to seek for re-election as President General, but I am going to govern and prepare for transition for the next 2 or 3 years as he plans for his landing ground. I think 3 years would have been enough. 3 or 4, even if it were 4 years, he would have told us that I'm going to spend the next 4 years planning for the transition to the new President General. I think that's an opportunity that he missed. But I wonder what Judith has to say on this.
Most of us Ugandans lack accountability. Not only accountability in the things we do here and there, in the offices here and there, even the things we say. People are not accountable for the words they say. Someone will just throw words anyhow, then the next day they will go back on their words. Like you said, the president of Uganda, that's what he usually does. So even the people, even the opposition, so it takes us back in that the people wonder what kind of people are they going to bring to replace Museveni. So that's why some people even say, no, I think it's Museveni should continue leading us, because if the opposition is behaving like this, what do we expect if we let him go? This is the same thing we are going to go through. So I was personally disappointed in Norbert Mao. I actually expected that he was going to stand down. I was very disappointed that he didn't prove that point, because this was his time to prove how truthful he is. This was his time actually to shine, if I could say. But you see, to him, power and being maybe leader of DP, maybe that's his ambition. Maybe that's how far he can go, and he's not really willing to let go of his biggest achievement in life. You understand? So sometimes we don't blame people, but it's just their inside. Maybe he knows that is the farthest he can go in life, and resigning that position would push him so much backward, given what has happened to other president generals of other political parties whenever they leave that position, that they tend to fade off. And also sometimes they also have fears. You see, the media overgives people with leadership position a lot of attention, in that these people that don't have leadership positions are left out of media. So they have the fear of disappearing from media. As you can see, even the best of the MPs that were in parliament, even when they fail, most media houses don't invite them back to maybe to give the insight on what they think the parliament should be discussing. They invite the current MPs, however bad they are at debate, however bad they are at articulating issues, or however bad they are at knowing the policies. Those are people they will invite. So our media does not look for quality. They look for a position. This MP of this area has come. They don't look for quality of debate or quality of articulation and knowing of the issues of the country. So that is what I think also Norbert Mao feared as a person. Was like, if I lose this, where am I going to go? So that is what I think. But either way, without defending him much, I was personally disappointed. Because in fact that day I logged in, I was not at my place to watch TV. I logged into social media to watch that press conference, seeing Norbert Mao stepping down, but it wasn't like the way I expected.
I am so sorry. I am so sorry that you are disappointed. you logged into Facebook specifically to listen to the man who has actually inspired you to get into politics. Stand down.
For sure.
And then he disappoints you, just like he might have disappointed so many other Ugandans. But like I said earlier, he did not have to stand down during his first press conference. Instead, he should have just told the country that I'm going to stay on as leader for the next 2 or 3 years and prepare a transition. I think Ugandans are very tolerant people. They are very accepting people. We would have still supported him. But at this moment, I would like to think that he probably missed the opportunity. But probably Mr. Mitala has a better idea. Mr. Mitala, what are your position?
Maybe before Mr. Mitala comes in, I want to give him something else to comment about, in addition to what he's going to talk about. The concept that until now, I think the one person who has come closest to peaceful transfer of power in the history of Uganda. The closest was Kebi. So we still await a president that will peacefully transfer power. Maybe we can forgive Mr. Museveni for that. Maybe we can.
This is interesting.
After Mao, I am more understanding of Mr. Museveni. Please.
This is very interesting. Should we?
No, I think for me, and it's really, really, unfortunate to even put it in these terms, that Mr. Mao has presided over the death of the Democratic Party. It's such a sad thing. With all his credentials, all the respect and authority he has commanded, for all his various achievements, he was a guild president, became an MP, became a district chairman. All his record has been superb. But as soon as he stepped into the role of, President General of the DP, things don't seem to have worked, in his favor. And I really don't know. It's a mark on his management skills, really. Sometimes you cannot be everything. I think maybe sometimes you've got to accept that nobody is really in that position to say that they are everything. Nobody has got all the qualities, that can make them, an all-rounder. And we might as well put it at this point in time that perhaps, maybe Mr. Mao is not the best administrator of all times. And I think it really pains me. I'm really at pains not to reach that conclusion. But having said what he was said, really, it was such an embarrassing thing. It's very disappointing. Personally disappointed, as Judith said. I've looked up to Norbert Mao in so many different, spectrums. Yeah, brilliant man, sharp with words, very eloquent, very, charismatic. And I just don't know what's happened to him. So it's really sad that he has been the death of DP, as DP is known. I wonder where he would put himself, on the scale, right, and look at where his predecessors have been, stepping into the footsteps of Benedicto Chiwanuka, Dr. Kawanga, the late Sebana Chizito, and all the people who have been at the helm of DP. I wonder where Mr. Mao would really weigh himself and where he would find his position amongst those names. Because for me, as far as I'm concerned, I'm reading a little bit about the history of the Democratic Party. I think he's probably been the worst performing DP, DP head. And I base that statement on the fact that it has been during his time that the Democratic Party has been dismantled. Because as we speak today, there is two elements. There is the new DP, and then there is his DP. Unfortunately, I think what Mr. Mao failed to do is that he failed to show leadership, because what he's been excellent as is been calling other people names. There are so many things you can relate to him in that respect. I think one of the classic ones is one when he called all his colleagues and he said, refer to them as momes. that was a no comeback. I think when he went into that direction, that was really a no comeback. So we could as well say, one of the benchmarks that President Museveni gave himself was that, and I don't know whether he said that around this time or before which particular elections, that all the old political party establishments will not be dead. I mean, he just needs to look around and see whether he's been, sharp on point on that. UPC, no more. Democratic Party, no more. Which other party is there? So at least he has seen off the old establishments.
Yes, and is also gone almost.
Yeah. And I don't know what to say about Mr. Mao. All I could say is that he's seen that he's presided over the death of DP, and that is something he will go down. It will go down with him for the rest of his life.
And also maybe one last thing on that. I think it has also, and I'm sorry, I have to say this. I think it has justified not only Ugandans, but Mr. Museveni as well, that he has proven himself not to be a worthy person to lead the country. he's proven himself to not be a worthy alternative. One of the things that Mr. Museveni and his supporters have articulated is they don't see anyone. Of course, it's an absurd claim that they don't see anyone who is fit to take over the country apart from away from Mr. Museveni. Now, while that claim and its implications are quite absurd, when you see things like these happen, then you can't help but think and say, wait a minute, well, maybe there was a point after all, because someone before they even have, once Binaisa said that Entebbe Oma.
Right.
Binaisa was a very honest man. He said Entebbe Oma, and indeed the Entebbe is sweet. So I think what this has demonstrated is that having had leaders before him step down, because if they did not step down, he would never have been president himself.
No.
He didn't have to die for him to be president. So by failing actually to live up to his word, he has just told the country that if ever he happens to be a leader, we cannot expect him to preside over a peaceful transfer of power.
Right.
At least not according to the voices of the people, but it will only happen on his terms. And one of the biggest problems of Uganda and our history is we have leaders who want to manage the country on their own terms.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's what exactly Norbert Mao did in DP. You know, when some of the leadership, you know, when positions fell vacant, he refused to call the delegates conference to replace those meetings, and then he went about sacking whoever he thought was not in agreement with his own line of approach. And in the end, what you saw was the complete dismantling of the party. This is why I said before that I don't know where he will look at himself and place in terms of you know, measuring himself against the scale of people here who have occupied that position before him, because the DP is a historical party, you know, and to see it where it is today, and to come to a situation where, and as you said, Henry, I mean, why did he have to give that undertaking? He was not under fire. No, there was no obligation whatsoever for him to give such an undertaking. So for him to go back on such a huge statement, it's a no comeback for him. He might stay there, but his usefulness is just completely gone. And I don't see how he's going to be able to rehabilitate himself from such a dangerous kind of position that he's placed himself into. But that's where we are.
Yeah, indeed, that's where we are for now. And I think it's very important for us to interrogate this question, because you made a very good point when you said that you inducted him pretty much as the worst president general for DP, in spite having a stellar resume before becoming president general for DP. I want to go back to one of the previous president general. Even when the late Sebagala presided over DP and also sold it to FDC, DP still managed to get over 25 MPs.
They kept intact.
They kept intact even after that surrender to FDC. So for you to come out and induct Mr. Mao, a distinguished member of society, as someone who has forfeited his legacy to clinging on to the DP leadership, I think the question of whether he can actually preside over a peaceful transition of power, if indeed he is the president of Uganda, is possible. I think it's not out of the of question that I think it's not it's not a bad thing to ask. I think it's a legitimate question.
And I agree absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest criticism that Mr. Museveni usually faces is that he has gone back on his word again and again and again. When he has given a firm commitment and said, come this time, this is the end of me. I want to see you guys in a different way, And so how do you distinguish, Mr. Mao from that position? How could you judge him? Because as I said, we cannot set a different standard for Mr. Museveni and set a different standard for Mr. Mao or any other leader for that matter.
Right.
The standard has got to be uniform. He gave an undertaking, and he himself, as a serious lawyer, he knows that if you've given such an undertaking, and I'm using that word carefully, an undertaking, he knows what it means. It was given in the public domain, and he said, if I don't achieve ABCD, I'll be a honorable man, I'll be a man of my word, and I'll step aside for somebody else. And then he's eaten that back. So
should we continue calling him Honorable Mao?
I don't want to go that deep, because I know he has his record. You cannot take away his record from that. As I said, from a very young age, he was head boy at Budo, came to Makere, did spectacular. He became guild president. I mean, his academic credentials are there; they speak for themselves. He's articulate. He's excitable. I like reading him. I've always liked listening to him. But we are now in a situation where we are saying, look here, what more can you promise and not live up to? That is a standard that he cannot. It's an indictment that he cannot run away from. I think he himself will have to go back and do some deep soul searching and find how he's got to make amends and rehabilitate his own image and position in society, because he's always going to be measured along that statement.
Right. And I wonder how that reflects on his alma mater, Yale, because he's a fellow of the Yale Melberg Fellowship, I think. But we're almost wrapping up. But before we wrap up, there's a debate that is going on about whether Mr. Kyagulanyi should withdraw the petition. But before we go into that debate, Patrick has a question here that I think we should try to delve into and see if we can actually interrogate it. I don't know to what truth it is. He says that the term limits are going to be extended to 7 years. And he asks you, the panelists, if the parliament tables such a bill to extend, first he said that the term limit is going to be extended, and then he asks a question following that. If that bill is indeed brought to the floor of parliament, do you think it's going to pass with majority votes? Now, we don't know. Of course, we currently do not know the nature of the new parliament. We do not know how people think. We haven't seen anyone debate on the floor of parliament. Of course, we know the sentiments they have, both as politicians and as Ugandan citizens, but we cannot authoritatively evaluate their decision making as MPs.
I think for me, I'm very uncomfortable even from the onset, from the suggestion that the parliamentary term should be extended to 7 years. It's not necessary. What does it serve? What purpose does it serve? Because we seem to be moving goalposts every now and again, and that's where our problem has been. I think this is what people need to understand, is that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. That is not negotiable. It's not debatable. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. And wherever there is an attempt to play about with the Constitution of the land, for me, it amounts to a coup. That's what. There's no question about that. That's the start of the discussion. That's the end of the discussion. We're having the problems we have because people failed to be faithful to the Constitution, and they decided to remove the term limits, which was one of the only remaining safeguards that we had against these presidential excesses. Because had people been sober and kept that term limits in position, we wouldn't be where we are today.
Right.
The paths to a smooth transition had been properly set out in the constitution until when people played about with it. So that's for me the first objection. It doesn't even sit well with me, and I wouldn't entertain it. I think we need to go back to what was put in place. I think the Ugandan 19 Constitution of 1995, by a largest degree of sound legal opinion, everybody does accept that it's possibly one of the best documents that we've ever had. It recognizes our past histories. And it tries to rectify the problems we had in the past. And I think one of the problems that the Constitution duly recognized at that time was that one of the problems was the president had too much power, and they wanted to limit the power of the president. But all those safeguards have been, kind of watered down. And I just don't really understand whether people are reading their sober minds when they begin proposing things of this kind. We should avoid being, selfish and, populists, saying things that are just said for the sake of exciting the public when actually they don't take the country forward. So for me, that's a no-go area, and I wouldn't entertain it in the first place.
Judith, you're underground and you're very active in youth politics. What are the people saying on the ground? What are the youth saying on the ground? Because this is a stake for the youth. This Uganda is going to be your country, if not now, in the next couple of years. Do you think that's justified? The change of the term limits. Do you think it's justified?
Of course, it's not justified. I think 5 years are just enough, and they're as good as they are. I don't know why the MPs are fighting so much to increase them to 7, because this has not been the first time. Even previously, illegally, they have increased them to 7 until the court ruled that it was illegal. So now it is starting again. And the worrying bit of it is, if it goes to the floor of parliament, it's going to pass. That one is for sure. That is the worrying bit of it. Because when you look at the current elections, even if a bill requires 3/4 of parliament to pass, as long as it's been brought by NRM, it will pass, because NRM already has 3/4 of the parliament. So they don't need to even bother with opposition and independence. Anyway, they can bother for just public
relations.
Yeah. Yes, public relations, but they already have 3/4, and that is what they were fighting for. That's why you saw when it came to elections, many new constituencies came in, because that is where they had to get the 3/4 from, and they achieved it. So what worries me most is if it steps on the floor of parliament, it's going to pass. Unless we Ugandans, you see, in age limit, the opposition MPs tried their best is to popularize it, Tojikwata here and there, but still there was not so much impact. So we, the population, have to be able to fight, despite the fact that they have the numbers on the floor of parliament. It will have to come back to us. We cannot these people cannot just keep changing the constitution at will, everything at will, and also as we're just looking on. For as long as we leave them, like everything in the constitution is going to be changed, the constitution will be useless. As per now, when it comes to the presidential term limit and barricades, it's useless, because now the president has no barricades anywhere. Like anyone can contest. So I believe it's worrying, and even when you hear from most of the youth we interact with, they also know it. Once it gets on the floor of parliament, that is like the easiest vote they're going to get, because at least now they have 3/4 of parliament. So,
Right. Okay, so, well, the thing is, I think this is a very interesting conversation to have, and as we continue engaging in this conversation, I think it's important for us to realize that sometimes things are going to be different. The Constitution, is it rendered toothless? I don't know. That's a question for debate. Which constitution that do we talk about? And to what extent do we respect the Constitution? Do we actually respect the Constitution? I don't know. Mr. Kajoba, any thoughts on that?
You know, someone once said that to cross the line, it all starts off with a small step. And before you know it, you're running as fast as you can in the wrong direction, just to justify why you started running in the first place. So one of the biggest problems that we have in Uganda is there is a line that we crossed. There is a line that we crossed. And unfortunately, I am a bit of a skeptic when it comes to seeing a way back, at least not now. You see, wherever you put a signpost and say, for example, in Uganda, we have these sayings that say,
Right. Right.
Don't urinate here. The penalty is 50,000. It means that if you have 50,000 shillings, you can urinate there.
You can do it. Yeah.
So the cost of urinating there is 50,000.
Right.
And so when we set these safeguards in our constitution, we said that the cost of this was our elected representatives deciding that it was worthy. And of course, in some instances, through a referendum.
Yeah.
And so what that meant is we did not necessarily say that these safeguards should stay. That's not what we were saying. We were saying they can stay when these stakeholders mentioned want them to stay.
Right.
And so what has happened is that these stakeholders have said, whether influenced or not, it's a discussion for another day, whether through mean spirit or for the interest of Uganda, it is not the matter right now. But some of these stakeholders have said that we trusted. So in the actual sense, what was strong in this constitution, what we gave power, were not the safeguards and the constitution itself. It was these that have the power to actually change it.
Right.
And therefore, if you can find a way to convince those that have the power to change it, then this document is devoid of its significance.
Right.
Because this document's strength and significance is attached to the ability of the stakeholders to uphold it.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, in our country, Uganda, I'm sorry to say, history has taught us, at least our previous history, that we cannot trust these stakeholders to safeguard things, especially when the things they are safeguarding affects them too. For example, if a bill like this were tabled in Parliament, I don't know where it's going to be tabled. Of course, embedded in that is increasing both the presidential term limit, I think 7 years, and MPs, I think something like that.
Right.
You're telling an MP who is going to receive, who has an opportunity to receive 7 years salary instead of 5, to vote on whether they are going to be paid for 7 years or 5.
We all know the answer to that.
Now, when you look at our history, especially now that almost running for public office has become like an entrepreneurship, an entrepreneurial opportunity. And in fact, one avenues of entrepreneurship is investing in a political office, because the return on investment is super high, very high. And so my confidence in this, I'm sorry to say, and when we talk of opposition, I am not privy to this narrative and rhetoric of thinking that the opposition are very opposition indeed. Because history has showed us that they have gone in there, and some of them have clearly declared,
Right.
because sometimes the opposition, especially in certain regions of this country, are a means to an end. Likewise, for example, people who come on the ticket of the ruling party do not necessarily believe in the ideology of the ruling party. Not necessarily. But because wherever they come from, this ticket gives them a higher chance of getting to where they're going. So it's a means to an end. I do not want to even believe that everyone surrounding Mr. Museveni actually necessarily follows Mr. Museveni because he's for what Mr. Museveni is for. So unless we can rethink this parasitic system of politics in our country, then I'm sorry to say, recently the parliament sat and thought that an 18-year-old can be president.
Right.
They said an 18-year-old can be president. Okay? And so we had 23-year-olds contest wanting to be president of this country. And so for me, when it comes onto the floor, I don't know whether it is coming, but if it comes onto the floor of parliament, I'm sorry, I am not as optimistic, especially when those that are affected are the same people who are going to vote on the same. And but like Mr. Mittal has said, it is an absurd affair because we crossed a certain line. It has rendered our constitution a document devoid of significance, largely, especially when it comes to how it impacts positions of political authority in the country.
I think for me, it's that, and I think on the basis of everything that you've said, which in principle I agree with, I think it worries me quite a lot. I'm really, really worried and disturbed because then I ask myself the question, how do we get ourselves out of that situation? And sometimes you scratch your head really, and the answers are really far, far, far coming. It's just, the only thing you can think about is maybe thinking really through a very kind of radical option. And the radical option is to overhaul everything, and make sure that we go back to the scratch and restart again. But even, the practicalities of that are also very complex. So how do we really get ourselves out of that situation is something that I constantly worry about. I look for the answers, and the answers just seem to evade me at every point.
Actually, Mr. Mitala, on that, I think what we might have to go through is the organic processes that many nations have gone through history. Now, some of them have been lucky to skip certain stages. So when you look at the countries today that we look up to in terms of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law, they have a history. They have a history. They may not have gone through exactly the same idea, the same struggles that we are experiencing today, but you could see overlaps and similarities here and there. And I like to think that the promise of a democratic society in Uganda still remains a dream so far away. And I don't mean really to demoralize Ugandans. I say this painfully. But when I look at it, I think the promise of democracy in our country is a dream so far away.
Especially it's eluded us more and more. The more we thought we are getting closer to it, the more it runs away. Which is a very unfortunate bit as well.
Yeah, until we get a leader, I don't know where that leader will come from. Whose values are not more in because every time someone whose goal is how do I get another term, then it means what suffers most and all their actions are towards continuity, non-service delivery. And the cost of continuity sometimes is corruption, is abuse of human rights, patronage, and authoritarian tendencies. Until we have a lead, I don't know who that will be. And I'm not even saying the side that he will be outside NRM or he will be in NRM. I don't even know.
Right.
Until
so essentially we need a statesman, and we don't have a statesman.
We need
because
a statesman.
I look at Mr. Museveni and I ask myself, you know, how where does he see himself in Uganda's posterity? You know, how will Uganda remember Mr. Museveni? It's still going to be a very difficult kind of question to answer. He's a man who started off with very good. Well, that's also questionable, because people who know him and people who know really his background and history, they tell you a very different story. Case in point is the case that Kanyomozi talked about in that Monitor News article, where he said, you know, this is a man who can never be trusted. And time again, he's proven himself that you cannot trust him. But even that, you might as well say, you can give him the benefit of the doubt and say, you know, he started from somewhere, got somewhere, and, you know, everything is now just gone off the track. So we've transitioned from a liberator, statesman, let's put it this way, from a violent liberator, a mistrusted statesman, to a despot.
Violent liberator. Liberating who? From what?
That's what I said. That the question is really, the background is questionable itself. I mean, if you really delve into the background of it, it's lots of insufficiencies.
Let us hear from Judith. She fell off while she was making her point. I wonder what she has to say before we wrap up. And Judith, if you can also go into the question of whether Honorable Kyagulanyi should indeed withdraw the petition, because that's a debate that is now being talked about a lot. In my opinion, I think he should go forward with the petition. He decided to follow the processes. Let him go through to the end. But I wonder what you guys think.
Personally, I also think he should go forward, because that is the decision he took. I'm sure by the time the petition was taken in almost towards the deadline, they were thinking through it. They were thinking through what they were doing, and they knew the consequences, because honestly speaking, we all knew that we would not get justice in courts of law. So he has reasons why he took that petition there. And plus, he may not have taken the petition there maybe to for the court to rule out the presidential elections, but maybe there's something he wants to achieve that we may not know, because he can't share everything with us. Then the other thing also, you look at the cost of withdrawing the case. It's very costly. You all know that. If we withdraw the case, it's too costly. So for a political party that's just like 6 months old, where do you expect a Kyagulanyi to get all those costs for withdrawing a petition? So you look at it and you're like, let them go ahead. Whatever they planned, let it move ahead. So I was concluding on the MPs giving themselves 7 years. Whether you or we people in Uganda really are not happy with it, but we know when it goes to the floor of parliament, it's going to pass. So we are trying to fight it before it goes to the floor of parliament, to do everything possible before it goes there, because we know when it reaches there, it's going to pass. So basically, that's what we are doing, because we know this government is more interested in staying in power than delivering services to people. You can see what they are doing to the education system right now. The education minister woke up the other day and like, kindergarten schools no more. So all the people who have been working in kindergarten schools, where are you going to get jobs for them? On top of that, we are not studying. Even when you introduced long distance learning, how many students can afford laptops? How many students can afford data that can sustain them? Then you introduce long distance learning, but you do not adjust the payment system of the fees. Because for long distance learning, in most cases, the fees is lower than the physical learning, because this is the student incurring the cost. But you don't revise the future. So, like we as students, all the youth of the country have gotten to know that the country is not interested in our education in our future. There are more people there, particular people who are more interested in staying in power at whatever cost. It doesn't matter whether they sell off to Uganda, whether the education things at 0%, it does not matter. So that is what we've realized, and we are ready to take on charge of what we want.
Mr. Mitala, as you wrap up.
Yeah, I think the petition should continue to its conclusion. You know, it may not. It's being conducted under very difficult circumstances, but it's not a wasted, you know, enterprise altogether. So there is a benefit to it. I mean, you know, some of these gains are incremental. You know, they keep on adding onto another, and they set precedents. You know, so for instance, if I reference you back to 2016, the Mama Mbabazi Yoweri Museveni, you know, petition, there were things that were mentioned by the court in that case, and if you go back to them and try to set benchmarks around them, you know, you can clearly see that there is a benefit to it. So ultimately, the petition should go ahead. Whatever the outcome of it, we are bound to respect, you know, the opinion of the court. We may not agree with what the opinion as the court has decided, but we are bound to respect, you know, whatever they have decided. And then following on from that, we can study and take lessons and see what further actions need to be taken following on from that. Because as Judith said, it would be very costly, and it would be a very huge mistake. It will be a setback, even something that might affect the integrity of Mr. Chakudani if he chooses to pull out, you know, at this point in time. So I think my opinion is that he should go ahead. Whatever comes out of it, we shall study the situation and see what else needs to be done. I think that's me. That's what I could say on that.
Is Mr. Sari still there?
We seem to have lost Henry. I'm pretty sure he'll be back very quickly. You can go ahead and give your verdict.
Well, I think I
know, Mr. Kaja, what's up? Go ahead.
I think I do not differ so much. You know, if he went to court, by going to court, there's something he was saying.
Right.
He was making a claim. And so if he finally withdraws, he will also be making another claim. Now, would that mean that he was wrong about what he thought was worthy to take to the courts of law? So, is he saying that he all of a sudden he has realized he has no case, you know? And what does that say about him as a person and as a leader, you know, as well? Would one be wrong to interpret that he was just driven by emotions and denial and failure to accept defeat, that these were kicks of a dying horse, and now he realizes this is going nowhere? So you see in Uganda there is a saying that eyo ezomumba and so if he has moved, you know, thus far, then he should, like Muzukulu wa Mswagali, and indeed also Judith mentioned, there is significance to it. There is significance to it on a number of levels, really. On a number of levels. If it is for nothing, the world is watching. There are so many stories that have developed. For example,
Absolutely,
because of
absolutely.
this case, people are pointing a certain magnifying glass into the judicial system of the country, and so because of that, because if you, for example, if you want to articulate and say that there is no rule of law in Uganda, what case do you have? Maybe if you went to court and somehow you can articulate that you did not get justice, or maybe because or you can articulate that the way your petition was handled left a lot to be desired, then you have a case. You have a case to make, and so there is value. There is value to it.
And I even think even the very case of bias that he's making, it can only be judged, from the outcome of the case. As I said, it may not result into the outcome that we hope we want, but it's not a lost enterprise. There's definitely something that will be of benefit, either academic or something that's really practical in terms of the development of the law, in terms of carrying forward, legal theory and legal precedents. So ultimately, the case should go ahead regardless.
I mean, you can only claim unfairness of the courts when there has been a case for the court to be unfair about. So, and so, and I don't know whether his claims are true about unfairness, but that can only be ascertained by the legal scholars like Juana Mitara.
You see that. I think I don't even think we're gonna get time, to go into this, but we could reserve that for the next weekend. The difficulty around this is that the person who is being accused of harboring bias, it's really up to them to look at themselves and make the decision whether they feel they are able to proceed or not to proceed. Now that is quite a high test. It is a high test at an individual level, knowing the stakes that are in place and all the the mechanizations that are taking place in the backyard, or the things that we've heard and seen. It's really a very kind of difficult thing to achieve. But I think everybody is at pains. This is a very difficult moment for all of us. I'm just hoping that people can see that we really need to do the right thing. And again, that is really kind of naive for me to say, because we know things are not as easy as they are. But you have to have the hope and belief in systems, and because the systems are there. I'm not worried about the systems. The systems and processes are there. It's the people who are presiding over the systems and processes who are abusing them. If you take somebody away from those systems and put in another caliber of people, you might arrive at a completely different conclusion. So it is very difficult. But me personally, I'm not going to lose hope, because the reason why I chose law as a profession is because I believe in the vehicle of law to achieve just objectives. It may be a bit far to achieve, and sometimes it's a struggle really to get justice, but you have to put on the fight. So that's all I can say on that.
And maybe to give the courts a benefit of the doubt as well. Maybe something we need to another question we need to think about now is, what are the chances that the Mr. Kyagulanyi faction can accept anything out of the court as just and fair, that doesn't necessarily go according to their anticipations?
As a sympathizer, because I'm not a member of NUP, but I'm very sympathetic to their cause. I believe they would accept the outcome.
Okay.
If the process is being seen to be fair, I think the only problem is that the process doesn't seem to be fair. Even as we speak right now, the process doesn't seem to be fair. And I think that's where the difficulty is. But if the process was to be fair, the question of accepting the outcome does not really arise. And I do have trust in the lead person, in Mr. Kyagulanyi's legal team. I think I do have trust in that gentleman. I believe he's capable of guiding. He's capable of guiding that team, you know, to make the right decisions.
And as as we conclude, actually, without necessarily exonerating Justice Owinyi-Doro, do you think we should take a lot out of his visit to President Museveni? One that was captured privately. I mean, unaware. Apparently, the pictures were sneaked out.
They have denied it. You saw the statement. If it's a truth, if it's not a fake statement, if it's a true statement, you've seen the statement from the judiciary denying that. If that's the case, then fair enough. But far and beyond that, I do take issue with the Chief Justice issuing statements that are not helpful in this entire situation. For instance, when he was in the hearing of the application for extension of time for them to be able to present further evidences, he said something which is really regrettable, and I think a man in his position should really refrain from making statements of such a kind. The statement he said was that if the team does not believe in what the court has to offer, they can as well take their petition somewhere else. And I think something of the same kind was said by him while he was in the constitutional case, when another case came up before him, and he said, "You take your case somewhere else." That is really unbecoming, and I think it puts question marks around his credibility, number one, and again it kind of raises the presumption of bias, which makes the whole process a lot more complicated. So those are issues. I wouldn't want to go very much into the details because that it's a legal. There are proceedings in court. We cannot really get so much into the meat on the bone.
I'm gonna give the last word to Judith. Let us wrap up this conversation. If you have anything else to say, otherwise, I think we have exhaustively engaged the four issues that we have discussed. Of course, there's many. There are so many issues in Uganda to discuss. We could not discuss everything, but I hope whoever has been around viewing has enjoyed the conversation this far. Judith.
I would personally find no offense with the Chief Justice visiting the President, and this is the Chief Justice. That is his appointment. Personally, I found no offense in it up to when recently we saw that the policeman in charge of the camera who looked at the photos was arrested. So what is the importance of the arrest? Why should they keep the meeting secret? This is the Chief Justice and the President. There is nothing wrong, but if that is what is happening, then it brings suspicions. You see, sometimes they do things, I don't know why they do so obvious things that will bring suspicions among people. I don't know why they keep taking those steps that will bring suspicion among people, but me personally, at first, I didn't see any problem, but given what happened, I now see there is a very big problem. Also, given the record of Chief Justice in his case in the Constitutional Court, I really don't have so much hope, unless otherwise he proves us wrong, but I'm not having.
All right. We are done. Just wrapping up, as you can see. Thank you so much again for